There's a place in America where silence is not peace. It is punishment. A place where men disappear without dying, where daylight is rationed, where voices fade from disuse, where the worst criminals on earth are not rehabilitated. They are contained. No riots, no escapes, no second chances. This is not a prison you serve time in. It is a prison that serves time on you. For the next 24 hours, we are going inside the most secure prison ever built, a place so isolated, so controlled, so unforgiving, that even other prisons call a hell on earth. Welcome to ADX Florence, the end of the line. In the high desert of southern Colorado, surrounded by nothing but rock, dust, and distance, sits a fortress that does not appear on postcards. No welcoming sign, no crowds, no visitors wandering in by accident. From the outside, it looks almost peaceful. Low concrete buildings, muted colors, clean lines. But that calm is an illusion. This facility is the Administrative Maximum United States Penitentiary, better known as ADX Florence. It is the end of the federal prison system. Not maximum security, not supermax. Administrative maximum. This is where inmates are sent after they've proven they cannot be controlled anywhere else. Men who kill guards. Men who led criminal empires from behind bars. Terrorists who inspired violence across continents. Master manipulators. Serial killers. Domestic extremists. Foreign enemies. At ADX Florence, behavior is no longer corrected. It is neutralized. Every detail of this prison was engineered with one goal in mind: total control of the human body and mind. Today, we are not telling one inmate's story. We are telling the story of a single day, 24 hours inside the most secure prison on earth. From wake-up to lockdown, from silence to isolation, from concrete walls to concrete thoughts. Because inside ADX Florence, time does not pass. It erodes. The arrival, the journey to ADX Florence begins long before the gates. Inmates don't arrive here casually. There are no buses full of transfers, no intake lines. Transfers are classified operations. An inmate destined for ADX Florence is shackled at the wrists, waists, and ankles, often weeks before arrival. Their movements are logged, staggered, and compartmentalized so no one ever knows the full plan. No last looks, no warnings, just orders. For many, the first sign they've been selected for ADX is a sudden silence from prison staff. Guards stop answering questions. Case managers stop making eye contact. Because once the paperwork is signed, there is no appeal. ADX Florence is not a punishment. It is a placement. And placements are permanent. The gates. The outer perimeter of ADX Florence is surrounded by multiple layers of fencing, razor wire coiled like sleeping snakes, motion sensors embedded into the ground, and camera coverage so dense that blind spots simply do not exist. The moment the transport vehicle stops, the inmate is no longer a person. He becomes security risk. Commands are shouted through masks and visors. Hands are shown. Eyes are lowered. Movements are slow and deliberate. Every step forward is permission-based. Every breath is monitored. Before the inmate even enters the building, he is searched multiple times, clothes removed, body scanned, restraints checked and rechecked. Even shoelaces are forbidden, because at ADX Florence, nothing is incidental. Intake without identity. There is no welcoming officer, no orientation video, no explanation of rules. Those come later, if they come at all. The inmate is escorted through sterile corridors painted in neutral tones designed to reduce sensory stimulation. No posters, no clocks, no windows. Time begins to dissolve immediately. He is photographed, fingerprinted, and assigned a number. Names do not matter here. Reputation does not matter. Inside ADX Florence, everyone is reduced to risk potential. The cell is not large. Roughly 7 feet wide, 12 feet long. Concrete walls, concrete floor, concrete ceiling. Even the bed is poured from concrete. There is a stainless steel sink that delivers water on a timer, a toilet with no seat, a narrow desk molded directly into the wall, and a window, but not the kind you're thinking of. It is 4 inches wide, positioned high, angled so the inmate cannot see the horizon. Only sky, no trees, no people, no passing time, just clouds moving in silence. This is where the next 23 hours and 45 minutes will be spent. Alone, lockdown. When the door closes, it doesn't slam. It seals. A soundless finality. No echo, no vibration, just absence. For the first time since arriving, the inmate is alone with his thoughts. And this is where ADX Florence truly begins. Not with violence, not with fear, but with silence. A silence so complete that many inmates later report hearing their own heartbeat echo in their ears. This is day 1. And for many, every day after looks exactly the same. There's a place in America where silence is not peace. It is punishment. A place where men disappear without dying, where daylight is rationed, where voices fade from disuse, where the worst criminals on earth are not rehabilitated. They are contained. No riots, no escapes, no second chances. This is not a prison you serve time in. It is a prison that serves time on you. For the next 24 hours, we are going inside the most secure prison ever built, a place so isolated, so controlled, so unforgiving, that even other prisons call hell on earth. Welcome to ADX Florence, morning without movement. Morning at ADX Florence does not arrive with sunlight. It arrives with mechanics. There is no alarm clock, no shouted count, no announcement over loudspeakers. Instead, the day begins when the building decides it has begun. Somewhere beyond the concrete, computers synchronize doors, cameras, sensors, and schedules. Lights shift from dim to slightly less dim. Air circulates. Systems check themselves. For the man inside the cell, this is how morning feels. Nothing happens. And yet everything has changed. The illusion of routine. At approximately 5 a.m., the lights inside the cell intensify just enough to signal that night is over. But the inmate does not move. Movement without permission is pointless here. ADX Florence operates on predictable unpredictability. The schedule exists, but it is never confirmed. Inmates are not told the time. They infer it through patterns that may or may not be real. The goal is subtle but deliberate. Disorient time perception. When you don't know the hour, the day loses structure. When the day loses structure, the mind loses footing. Breakfast without contact. Breakfast does not arrive with footsteps. There is no tray cart rattling down the tier. No voice announcing meals. A narrow slot opens in the cell door. A tray appears. The slot closes. Total interaction time, under 5 seconds. The meal is nutritionally sufficient and psychologically empty. Powdered eggs, toast, a piece of fruit, milk, no salt packets, no sugar, no choices. Food at ADX Florence is not about comfort. It is about control. The inmate eats alone, seated on a concrete slab, facing a concrete wall, beneath a camera mounted behind reinforced glass. He is watched as he chews, watched as he swallows, watched as he finishes. And when the tray is removed, it is removed the same way it arrived, without a word. The cameras never blink. Every cell is under constant surveillance. The cameras do not record for later review. They are live, real-time monitoring by officers who never appear in person. Even self-harm attempts are treated as security incidents first and medical emergencies second. At ADX Florence, your body belongs to the institution. Your thoughts are the only thing left unmonitored, which is exactly why the institution wants them broken. The mind under silence. By mid-morning, the silence begins to change shape. It is no longer empty. It becomes heavy. In other prisons, noise creates chaos. Arguments, clanging bars, shouted insults. At ADX Florence, silence becomes a pressure. Former inmates describe hearing things that are not there, footsteps that never arrive, voices calling their name, buzzing that vanishes when focused on. The brain, deprived of stimulation, creates its own. This is not accidental. Psychologists consulted during the design of supermax prisons understood something critical. Isolation accelerates psychological collapse faster than violence ever could. No communal space. There is no cafeteria. No yard share with others. No chapel services with rows of inmates. Every aspect of existence is individualized containment. Even movement, when it is allowed, is done alone. If an inmate is permitted to leave his cell, it is for one reason only: exercise. And even that is a misnomer. The yard. If the inmate has earned the privilege of recreation, he is strip-searched, shackled, and escorted down a corridor by multiple officers. He does not see other inmates. He does not pass them. Movement is staggered to prevent even accidental contact. The recreation area is not a yard. It is a concrete enclosure slightly larger than the cell, open to the sky, high walls on all sides, a pull-up bar bolted into concrete. That is it. No grass, no track, no bench. The inmate is alone with the sky above and concrete below. He can walk in circles. He can do push-ups. He can stare upward. But he cannot see another human being. And after 1 hour, sometimes less, he is shackled again and returned to his cell, back to the box. The return to the cell is often worse than never leaving, because now the inmate has seen the sky and been reminded that it exists beyond reach. This is the rhythm of ADX Florence. Brief permission, immediate removal, total isolation. It trains the mind to stop expecting relief. The first psychological fractures. By late morning, many inmates begin speaking out loud, not to others, to themselves. Some recite legal arguments. Some repeat memories. Some invent conversations. Others go days without making a sound, until one day they scream, not in anger, but to prove they still can. The architecture control. ADX Florence does not rely on brutality. It relies on design. Every hallway, every angle, every material. Nothing here is accidental. This prison was not built to house inmates. It was built to contain intent. Before a single inmate ever arrived, architects, behavioral psychologists, and federal security experts sat in rooms and asked one question: how do you stop a human being from exerting influence? The answer was not force. It was isolation, perfected, concrete as a weapon. The walls inside ADX Florence are not merely thick. They are sound-absorbing. Unlike older prisons, where echoes travel and voices leak through bars, ADX cells are engineered to kill noise. Shouts do not carry. Banging does not echo. An inmate can scream for hours and never know if anyone heard him. That uncertainty is intentional. Concrete is poured in layers, reinforced to resist impact, and finished with surfaces designed to be difficult to damage, but also uncomfortable to touch for long periods. Nothing is soft, because softness invites rest. Rest invites thought. And thought, here, is dangerous. The invisible guards. Unlike traditional prisons, guards at ADX Florence are rarely seen. They observe from behind reinforced glass. They communicate through intercoms. They appear only when absolutely necessary. This creates a subtle but powerful dynamic. The inmate is constantly watched, but never acknowledged. Psychologically, this removes a human feedback loop. No facial expressions. No tone changes. No emotional response. The inmate's actions receive consequences, but never reactions. It teaches one brutal lesson. You do not matter here. Control without touch. Force is rarely used at ADX Florence, because it does not need to be. Doors are automated. Lights are automated. Water flow is automated. If an inmate refuses to comply, compliance is removed. No recreation. No commissary. No reading materials. The punishment is always subtraction, and subtraction over time erases identity. The failure of escape. ADX Florence has never experienced a successful escape, not because inmates don't try, but because escape is mathematically impossible. The facility sits at the base of the Rocky Mountains, far from population centers. Even if an inmate somehow breached the inner security, something no one has ever done, he would still face multiple perimeter fences, motion detectors, armed response teams, miles of open terrain, and no transportation. Escape planning requires communication. Communication is impossible here. Why the worst come here? ADX Florence is not for inmates serving long sentences. It is for inmates who pose ongoing threats. Men who continued running criminal organizations from prison. Men who attack staff repeatedly. Men whose presence destabilized entire facilities. Some arrived after orchestrating murders while already incarcerated. Others after radicalizing fellow inmates. For them, ADX Florence is not an escalation. It is a dead stop, the cost of total control. But containment has consequences. Human beings are not built for extreme isolation. Over time, inmates begin to lose the ability to concentrate, emotional regulation, social skills, sense of time, sense of self. Some begin to hallucinate. Others withdraw entirely. A few descend into permanent psychological damage. And yet, the system persists. Because from a security standpoint, it works. ADX Florence is quiet. No riots. No hostage situations. No gang wars. Just silence. Midday at ADX Florence. By noon, the inmate has spoken to no one, touched no one, seen no one. Lunch arrives the same way breakfast did. The slot opens. The tray appears. The slot closes. The hours stretch. And the longest part of the day approaches. Afternoon in isolation. Afternoon inside ADX Florence is not defined by activity. It is defined by endurance. The body has adjusted to the stillness. The eyes have memorized every crack in the wall. The mind, deprived of external input, turns inward. This is the most dangerous part of the day, because this is when thought has nowhere left to go. The stretch of time. Without clocks, time becomes elastic. Minutes expand. Hours blur. Former inmates describe the afternoon as floating, a sensation of being suspended in a moment that refuses to end. Some mark time by meals, others by light changes. Some stop tracking it altogether. When you cannot measure time, you cannot imagine an end. And when there is no end in sight, despair becomes logical. The desk in the wall. Each cell contains a narrow concrete desk. It is not there for productivity. It is there to give the illusion of purpose. Some inmates write letters they will never send. Some draft legal briefs over and over, chasing appeals that have already failed. Some write manifestos no one will ever read. Writing becomes survival, a way to anchor thought, but materials are limited. Pencils are short, flexible, and counted. Papers rationed. Every word costs something. Reading without context. Books are permitted, but controlled. Titles are screened. Subjects are restricted. Quantities are limited. Many inmates read the same book dozens of times. Not for the story, but for structure, beginning, middle, end. A reminder that something, somewhere, still follows order. The psychological wall. By mid-afternoon, many inmates experience what psychologists call cognitive drift. Thoughts loop. Memories replay without variation. Regrets sharpen. The mind begins to cannibalize itself. This is when inmates pace the cell in perfect rectangles. 7 steps forward. Turn. 7 steps back. Over and over. Not to exercise, but to feel movement. Noise as a weapon. Occasionally, sound breaks the silence. A distant door. A muffled command. A shout that echoes and vanishes. These moments are worse than silence, because they remind the inmate that others exist and are unreachable. Some inmates respond by banging on the walls, not to communicate, but to prove resistance. The walls do not respond. Discipline without violence. Infractions at ADX Florence are handled quietly. No yelling, no physical confrontation. Privileges are removed. Recreation canceled. Reading materials delayed. Showers reduced. Punishment here is subtraction of the already minimal. By design, there is nowhere to fall, only further down. The shower. Showers are permitted several times a week. They are not communal. The inmate is escorted shackled to a single-person stall. Water pressure is controlled. Temperature is regulated. Even cleanliness is supervised. For many inmates, this is the only time they see a mirror, and for some, they stop recognizing the person looking back. The thought that returns, As afternoon drags toward evening, a question resurfaces again and again. How long can a human mind survive like this? There is no answer, because for many inside ADX Florence, survival is not measured in years. It is measured in function. Can you still think clearly? Can you still remember who you were? Can you still imagine a future? For some, the answer fades by the day. The men behind the doors. The most unsettling thing about ADX Florence is not the building. It is the people it contains. Not because they are monsters in the cinematic sense, but because many of them once lived ordinary lives before becoming symbols of absolute threat. ADX Florence is not filled with impulsive criminals. It houses architects of violence, men whose influence extended beyond physical presence, men who could command, inspire, radicalize, or terrorize others without lifting a hand. And that is precisely why they are here. The criteria for disappearance. To be sent to ADX Florence, an inmate must demonstrate one thing above all else: uncontainable influence. This includes ordering murders from inside prison, leading extremist networks, coordinating large-scale criminal operations, repeatedly attacking staff, inciting violence among inmates. Time served does not matter. Age does not matter. Remorse does not matter. What matters is whether the system believes the inmate can still reach others. If the answer is yes, the road ends here. Terrorists in silence. Some of the most infamous terrorists in modern history have lived inside ADX Florence. Men responsible for mass casualties. Men whose names once dominated headlines. Men who inspired violence far beyond U.S. borders. Here, they are stripped of platforms. No interviews. No statements. No followers. Their ideology dies in silence. That is the point. ADX Florence is designed to neutralize symbolic power. The masterminds. Others inside ADX are not known to the public at all. Crime bosses who never pulled the trigger. Strategists who organize logistics. Financiers who launder blood money. They were the brains behind the violence. And brains are dangerous. Inside ADX Florence, intelligence is isolated from opportunity. Cunning becomes useless. Manipulation has no audience. The serial offenders. Some inmates arrived after decades of institutional violence. Men who attacked guards repeatedly. Men who used everyday objects as weapons. Men whose mere presence caused unrest. Traditional prisons fail to control them. ADX Florence does not try. It removes the environment entirely. No hierarchy here. There are no gangs at ADX Florence. No alliances. No pecking order. Isolation destroys hierarchy. Without communication, power evaporates. The man who once commanded hundreds is now alone with concrete and memory. And memory in isolation can be crueler than any guard. The loss of identity. Over time, even the most notorious inmates lose their sense of self. Without feedback, identity dissolves. You are no longer feared, no longer respected, no longer opposed. You are simply present. This is the quiet punishment of ADX Florence. Not pain, but irrelevance. The question of deserving. Critics argue that no human deserves this level of isolation. Supporters argue that some individuals cannot exist safely in society, or even in prison populations. ADX Florence exists at the intersection of those arguments. It is not justice. It is risk management. And risk management has no room for mercy. Evening approaches. As daylight fades, though the inmate cannot see it, the facility begins its transition to night. Dinner arrives. The slot opens. The tray appears. The slot closes. One more meal closer to sleep. One more day nearly survived. But night inside ADX Florence brings its own kind of danger, when the lights never really go out. As night settles over Colorado desert, ADX Florence does not sleep. The lights dim, but never turn off. The cameras continue to watch. The systems continue to breathe. Inside a concrete box, a man lies on a slab that never softens, staring at a ceiling that never changes. No bars to rattle. No voices to answer. No darkness deep enough to hide in. Just thought. And in this place, thought is the final punishment. ADX Florence was built to end influence, to silence danger, to ensure that certain names never echo again. And by every measurable standard, it works. No escapes, no riots, no control lost. But the cost is something harder to quantify. What happens to the human mind when isolation is not temporary, but permanent? When time no longer moves forward, only inward, when survival is reduced to endurance. This is not a story about redemption. It is not a story about mercy. It is a story about a line drawn so far from society that once you cross it, the world moves on without you. And somewhere tonight, inside ADX Florence, someone is still awake, counting breaths, counting cracks in the wall, counting days that no longer feel like days at all. If this documentary made you think, if it pulled back the curtain on a place few will ever see, support the channel by liking this video. Share it with someone who believes they've seen the limits of the justice system, because this is what exists beyond those limits. And if you want more deep, investigative crime and prison documentaries that go where others won, subscribe to the channel.